Hi, my name is Amy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making an 18th century petticoat to go with my middling merchant class ensemble. I'm using this natural colored linen to make the petticoat, and it will be worn over this shift bum roll and my 1730s Georgian stays. I don't have my stays on my mannequin today because the lacing ties have not been delivered yet. As soon as they're delivered, they will be on my mannequin as well. So let's get started making a petticoat.
The first thing I did after cutting the 4 panels I was using for the petticoat was to pull a thread and square up the sides and top and bottom of each of the 4 pieces before I started sewing them together. Pulling a thread and cutting along that pulled thread line is the easiest way that I know of to square up linen. Here you can see the pulled line of string really well. After trimming the top and the bottom of each of the panels, I used the scraps from that trimming to create 1-inch wide bias tape. I used this bias tape to bind the pocket slit openings once I cut those in the sewn together skirt. After preparing the bias tape, I sewed all 4 panels of the petticoat together, and then I determined where to cut the pocket slits in the sides of the petticoats. After cutting the slits, I attached the binding to the right side of the petticoat. Incidentally, I did sew all the seams using a French seam to prevent unraveling once the petticoat was finished. Here I am repeating the process on the second pocket slit. I marked 13 inches down from the top of the petticoat and cut down the slit, and then pinned the bias tape on. I attached the bias tape using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. I'm not sure what happened here to my focus, but it pops back in just a second. Once the bias tape was attached, I folded the extra edge over the seam allowance and pressed it down. I then folded the edge a second time and pressed it again, pinning it in place. I repeated the same process for the other side. I attached the binding by hand using really tiny whip stitches. So this is the inside and this is the outside. I'm really impressed. All this hand sewing I've been forcing myself to do is really improving my techniques. And of course we can't have a video without a little gratuitous Pip content. Whenever I'm hand sewing, she loves to be in my lap. After I finished binding both pocket slits, it was time to figure out the front and back pleating. I'm really not a fan of math. Sorry, Kathy Hay. I'm not sure where the footage of me actually pleating the petticoat went, but basically I started with the back and an 8-inch wide inverted box pleat, so it takes up 16 inches of fabric. And then I continued towards each edge with knife pleats facing towards the back. The front was finished in the opposite way. I started with a box pleat that was 8 inches wide and knife pleats that went towards each side, towards the back. After finishing the pleating, I basted across both the top of the front and the top of the back just to secure the pleats in place. To make the waist ties, I cut 2 pieces of twill tape 20 inches longer than my waist measurement. I found the center of one piece of twill tape and matched it to the center front of the petticoat. And I pinned the petticoat so it was about halfway up the side of the twill tape so that I could fold it over on the other side to encase the raw seam allowance. I also folded the ends of the twill tape in half so that when I attached it to the, I could also sew the twill tape closed. I left the edge of the twill tape that would be folded over the raw edge of the petticoat loose for now, and I secured that down later by hand after attaching the twill tape. I sewed the twill tape to itself using an edge stitch. And then when I got to the petticoat, I sewed as closely to the secured edge as I could, leaving that second edge free. Before I attached the back waist tie, I decided to make a garment tag using Versamark ink and rubber stamps. Turtles are my favorite animal, so it only fair that that's what I used. I matched the label up with the center of the back of the petticoat, and then I used the same method that I did on the front to attach the waist strap to the back of the petticoat. If you are interested in learning how to make a Versamark tag, I will have a video coming up in the next couple of weeks that will show you how to do so. Before securing the waist ties down, I cut the extra edge of the tag off the top so that it was level with the back of the petticoat. And then I folded the twill tape over and secured it down using a whip stitch.
Hi, we are working on my linen petticoat again. I have pinned up the hem, see if you can see that, and gotten it all ready to stitch. I'm going to stitch it by hand. That is the last thing to do other than to give it a wash and a quick press, and then it will be finished. So we will stitch the hem and then be done. To hem my petticoat, I am using a piece of, I don't know if you can see it, waxed linen thread. And And I'm going to be using the cross stitch, sometimes it's called the herringbone stitch, to hem. First I'm going to tie off in the seam allowance. And if you're not familiar with the herringbone stitch, it is worked in the opposite direction that you would think. You know, normally when you're stitching, you tend to go right to left, if you are right-handed. The herringbone stitch, though, is worked left to right. So I'm going to start by pulling the thread through this front piece here, which is basically just the fold of the hem. And then you're going to move over a little bit, pick up a few strands from the main piece of fabric. I think there's 3 on that one. And then you're going to come down about the same distance away, pick up a few strands on the hem. And again on the main piece. I'm not going all the way through right now because I'm sewing through this seam allowance right here. But on this next stitch I will be on the main piece of fabric, and I'll be able to turn it over and show you how well this stitch is hidden on the main side of the fabric, on the right side. And you just continue this process all the way around. You can take bigger stitches than this, but I want to make sure this hem is nice and secure. So I'm leaving relatively small space between my stitches. They're about the 1/4 inch apart. I seem to have more issues with knots when I wax my thread than when I don't wax my thread. It's kind of annoying. And you just continue in that same manner. All the way around. Above the fold here should just be barely above the fold, so that they remain as small as possible. So this is what it looks like on the inside. And those 3 little stitches right there are what it looks like on the outside. So now we'll just continue. So as you can see, when I started out, I was making my cross stitches much less of a distance down the hem. But as I got moving on, and actually it didn't take me very long to get that far, I decided that I liked the little bit longer stitch here, so I've extended that. I'm not going to go back and replace these because they're fine the way they are. It's just going to look a little bit different from where the end of the hem matches up with the beginning of the hem. But with this stitch, this hem is now finished. I'm going to tie it off under this seam here. Now I'm going to bury the thread. With that, the hem of my petticoat is finished, which means my petticoat is finished. I'm going to give it a wash and press, and then I will show it on my mannequin. I love linen, except for how easily it wrinkles. I just pressed that petticoat. But even with the wrinkles, I am thrilled with how well it turned out. The pleats look good, the hem has turned out wonderfully, and it's the perfect length. So the next part of this project is to make the jacket to go over it. Here is the back of my petticoat finished. I have it on my mannequin. The length is good. It will not brush the ground when I'm wearing it, which is perfect. And let's get a look at some of those pleats. So in the back, this is an inverted box pleat, and then all these knife pleats go towards the back. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. If you would like to see more content from me, please subscribe. And if you would like to have a notification whenever I upload, click the little bell and YouTube will let you know.